Good evening, and welcome to the Angry Capitalist Podcast. I trust you're doing well. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Angry Capitalist Podcast. And this episode, I'm going to be covering house hacking, financing your deal. If you do want to find out a little bit more information about this, at the end of the video, I will have linked another part of a house hacking component, which is analyzing a potential deal. So I highly recommend watch the video all the way through the end and check out that linked video. Additionally, if you like this kind of content, please do go ahead and like the video. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. All right, getting into it. So before I go into depth on this topic, just to briefly throw that out there, this video is for educational and entertainment purposes. This should not be considered as financial advice or tax advice. I don't know your specific situation, so take responsibility, do your own due diligence, and where applicable, hire an appropriate tax or financial advisor. Now that we've got that out of the way, what is house hacking? It is effectively the practice of owner-occupying a multifamily building to offset the mortgage costs with the cash flow from the other unit or units. The goal here in doing this is to build a solid and resilient financial foundation for yourself. During the course of this video, I'm going to cover three distinct sections. Section 1 will be components of a deal. Section 2 will be terms that you should know in order to speak intelligently when dealing with real estate professionals, whether they be your loan or mortgage broker or just a real estate agent or an attorney. Third, we'll be going over building an attractive deal to get financing. So looking at the perspective of a loan broker or a mortgage broker or a loan officer or a mortgage broker, what kinds of things do you want to have put together in order to be really attractive, to get them to want to work with you, and also to go to bat for you to get your deal approved? Now, Section 1, components. A few components that you need to keep in mind for the purpose of putting a deal together. You'll have, of course, the property to be acquired, your credit score, your down payment amount, the actual loan, as well as, if you're going to use it, the loan backing. This would be, for example, FHA or VA. What is being done there is essentially the government is backing the loan up to a certain amount. So this allows for banks to take in a higher loan to value ratio or LTV, as well as to lower your required down payment. Next, we have relationships. This includes your relationship with your team, such as the loan officer, the realtor, if you're going to use them, as well as the attorney. On that topic, I highly recommend actually going out and meeting with a few different loan officers and brokers, as well as maybe going through a few different realtors, just to find a good relationship. You don't need to annoy them and you don't want to waste their time, but you still want to get a good gut feel for them. Remember this if you feel uncomfortable with that, as well when it comes to selecting the individuals to be on your team. They want you to make a deal, but you want to make a good deal that will work for you for the long term. Next, getting into various terms and terminology. This is the terminology that it's not an official definition. I'm rewording things to make it as plain English as I possibly can and to condense down the full definition for your usability. So if something I say doesn't seem quite right, or you're not sure about it, go ahead and dig a little bit deeper. Additionally, if you hear a term that gets used, you could ask the specific individual, such as especially your loan officer, if they use a term, come right out with them and be like, hey, I'm not too familiar with that term. I haven't heard that before. Could you explain that to me? Or just go ahead and Google it or search it when you have a chance. Okay. So you have principal. Now, what principal is, it's the amount borrowed to be repaid. So if you take out a loan for $10,000, that $10,000 is your principal, and it will also apply to the principal amount that you'll repay each month. Next, we have interest. That is the cost to borrow money. It's usually expressed as a percentage. Right now, we're about 6 to 7% on most mortgage loans. Quick note on interest, you have simple. That is typical for personal loans. And then you have compounded. Compounded interest, it's a little bit complex for some people. Really, you're just paying interest on interest. That's why we have mortgage calculators. Don't get too held up on it. But on a mortgage, it's not, for example, $100 plus 7%. You can do a deep dive on that by itself if you would like to. But for the purpose of this video, I'm briefly covering it with you guys. So next you have debt service, as well as DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio. So what that effectively is it's your ability to repay the loan. Specifically your debt service, that's how much you have to pay in principal and interest each month. Your DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio, would be your income divided by the loan amount. Typically, you want to be under 30%. So your total debt obligations in the month, a mortgage lender wants to keep that total underneath 30% of your gross income. This would include the mortgage amount itself, as well as if you have any other loans, such as car loans or anything like that. Next, we have loan to value, or LTV. What that is you have the loan amount that you'll be taking out, and you have the assessed value of the asset. Now, when it comes to the assessed value, that is determined by an appraiser doing a separate appraisal, which is typically independent of the bank. You will frequently have to pay for this yourself, out of pocket, or it'll be rolled into your loan amount, depending on how that's set up. So that appraiser compares your asset to other buildings that are similar, that have been sold within a recent amount of time, let's say 6 months. They'll compare those values and come up with an appraised amount for the asset you want to acquire. Now, once we consider your loan amount to the value of the asset, that can be offset with your down payment, as well as that's where the FHA and the VA comes in, is they can allow for a higher loan to value amount than banks will typically take on. Typically, they want to have an 80% LTV. That's where you get the 20% down payment from. Is really what the bank is looking at is that LTV. The down payment is typically 20%. That's just common practice, but it's the loan to value that they're concerned about. Next, we have assessment. So as I've already covered that, that's what the bank believes the asset you want to buy is worth based on the current market value. So if that asset were to be sold, or comparing it to other assets, meaning houses, multifamily properties that have been sold, that assessment is a comparison. To be very clear, the assessment has no real correlation with the cash flow value of the asset. that is where our analysis that'll be linked at the end of this video comes in. So for example, especially in the real estate bubble, you'll have people trying to sell a multifamily building for way more than it's really worth based on the cash flow that it produces. So be careful. Next, you have amortization and amortization schedule. Effectively, that is a plan to repay the debt, your principal and interest, and the amortization schedule is just that with a timeline. So, for example, you have your loan term. So the term of your loan next would be how many years or how many months that you're going to be repaying that on in the amortization schedule. So, for example, it could be a 30-year mortgage. It could be a 20 or a 15-year mortgage. That's your term, and your amortization is your plan to repay that debt, and the amortization schedule is how those monthly payments are going to be made. Next, we have escrow and escrow contribution. So escrow is, in the barest terms I can explain it, it's a special account that holds funds for a specific purpose. In this instance, it would be for the taxes and the insurance. So as an example, you may have to put something down, even if it's just to put money into your escrow account. And additionally, each month, you're going to have a contribution of your mortgage that'll be escrowed. That is money that will go towards paying your taxes when the tax bill comes up, as well as the mortgage insurance. Additionally, if you're doing FHA or VA, they will also require insurance on the mortgage. So that's to insure the lender in case you default or the house gets totally destroyed or something like that. Okay. Next, moving on to building an attractive deal to get financing. Although before I move on, there are a bunch of other terms that are out there. I just wanted to give you all a quick rundown of a bunch of different terms that you'll commonly hear. Go ahead, do further research on this topic. Just because you're watching this video, I already know that you're doing your research and you're learning as much as you can about this, hopefully before pulling the trigger. If you've already pulled the trigger on a property, awesome initiative. I hope it's a good deal. Okay, moving on. Building an attractive deal for the purpose of getting financing. So a quick note on that. When it comes to the FHA as well as the VA-backed loans, those terms can and will change, and frequently they change from year to year. So I'm not going to go super in depth onto those. Additionally, although the FHA or the VA, they may set their own set of terms, lenders may still be a little bit more strict with you. And part of the purpose of building an attractive deal is to get your lender to be very comfortable with giving you the money for this and ensuring that they have full faith in your ability to repay them and to be a good steward of that asset. So one of the first things that, in my opinion, is the most important aspect to build an attractive deal is a good asset at a good price. You don't want to overpay for even a good asset, and you especially don't want to overpay or try to buy a lemon or a turd. A lemon is commonly referred to as a sour fruit, meaning you went to pick a fruit, take a juicy bite, and you found out shortly later that it was a world of pain and misery. So this goes back to the video that will be linked at the end. And just additionally, with having your inspection done, checking the property out yourself, making sure it's in a good area, that all goes into picking a good asset to buy. Remember, the collateral for the bank is that asset. They want it to be worth something. Next, this goes back to what I was talking about previously. When you're buying this property, you want your debt service coverage ratio, or DSCR, to be 30% or less. And that should include the income both that you personally have, as well as the income that is projected from the other units. I talk about this more in the linked video at the end. But effectively, you want your monthly income, gross income, to be 3 times what your payment on this asset, as well as any other debt obligations, would be. Okay. Next, having a good credit score. So, especially for the purpose of getting a deal financed and having a lender go to bat for you, I do not recommend going for the minimum. As of 2023, the minimum credit score for an FHA or VA loan was 500. I strongly recommend going forward with 700 plus. You may not be in that position right at this point in time, but be patient, put the work in, get that credit score up. It'll, one, make your life so much more easier when it comes to getting the financing, but additionally, it may even lower your monthly interest rate as well. Next, your down payment, or just having something to put down. So as of 2023 for FHA, the minimum, if I remember correctly, was dropped down to 3.5%. For the VA, for our veterans out there, the minimum is 0%. My personal recommendation is you come in with at least 5%. Although, once again, that may be tricky, but if that's a bit difficult, double check, does this person want too much for the asset in question? And additionally, having that 5% just makes you a much, much more attractive borrower. And additionally, you should at least have a little extra as a personal emergency or a CapEx fund. So let's say, hypothetically, this is being recorded in February of 2024. If you find yourself in a real estate crash, but you're very confident that you have a good asset where the tenants are still paying and there's no sign that they'll lose their job, or that you have tenants you can get in there and you want to move forward and take advantage on something, even if you don't put the full 5% down to buy that asset or more, I recommend having a little bit of a nest egg just in case something goes wrong. And last, but perhaps definitely not least, maybe most important compared to having a good asset, is having your documentation ready when you meet with that loan officer or mortgage broker. You want to make a good impression. Additionally, on the topic of making a good impression, and aside from documentation, prepare yourself decently, get a haircut, make sure you're clean shaven or just neaten your beard up. Additionally, I do recommend, you don't have to go full tuxedo, shirt and tie, but having a good button down shirt, some slacks, decent looking shoes. You could potentially go a more blue collar route, still with a button down shirt, maybe short sleeve, jeans, tuck it in, wear a belt, maybe your work shoes, work boots, make sure they're nice and clean. Think of this from a mortgage broker's perspective. They're typically going to deal with 2 kinds of people, in my opinion, when it comes to real estate. Section 1 is more investors. These are guys who are perhaps a little bit more white collar. Maybe they're involved in real estate somehow, maybe they're not. But you're coming in as an investor who is looking to make a deal and you're seeking money. Dress the part. You don't have to go to the nines, suit, tie, and all that, but clean yourself up. Section 2, blue collar people. It is astounding to me how many blue collar individuals really, really can make it in the real estate space, partially because they understand systems. They understand the real world and physical reality and what goes into repairing and maintaining a property. So I recommend selecting one or two of those other archetypes that they're used to dealing with. Personally, when I went in, yeah, button-down shirt, slacks. No, actually, I worked at a bank when I bought this place originally. So I went in with a shirt and tie. And that was part of my discussion with the loan officer was, hey, yeah, I just got out of work. I work for another bank. They don't offer FHA or VA loans, but my realtor referred me to you, and I want to see if we'd be a good fit together. Coming into it with that kind of attitude too, you don't have to be terrified, but don't be humble, but be humble to expect. Build a human connection with this person, feel them out, let them know you want to feel them out a bit to see if you'd be a good fit for each other, both the institution and as individuals. I even recommend to say, hey, I'm looking to get into real estate. This is my first step. I'm trying to build a good foundation. I'm going to live there. I'll be right there in case anything goes wrong to take care of the property. I'm looking to potentially build a long-term relationship too. If we're a good fit and this goes well, I'd like to continue to do business with you long-term. Mortgage brokers and loan officers love those kinds of relationships. So, on that note, where was I? Having your documentation ready. So this is not exactly as minimally necessary to get approved or to get the process started. But once again, we want to make a good impression, so I'm going a little bit heavier, okay? I recommend having 3 years tax returns, and I also recommend having 2 to 5 months worth of pay stubs. What are situations where you may need to go further out with pay stubs or print off of your pay history? In my situation, I work in sales. So if I want to go into to get a loan, a mortgage, I need to display a longer period of my income because it varies month to month. Likewise, if you have some kind of a variable income, go for a longer track record of that income to display like, hey, look, I don't go months out of the year with absolutely nothing. I can, despite my cyclical revenue stream, I can pay for this, and that won't be a problem. Next, you want to have on hand your photo ID, your driver's license, if you will, as well as your social security card. You need to prove you are who you say they are. More than likely, they'll be super happy you have this both on hand along with everything else. They'll take a copy and it'll go into your folder that they'll put together for their underwriting department. To be clear on that point, because I just now brought it up, typically you don't just get your approval from the loan officer directly. It has to go through a bit of a review process to be confirmed that they can lend that money out to you. Most loan officers can only lend out like $50,000 without underwriting approval. Additionally, for the purpose of underwriting, that's often handled with the FHA and the VA, and they have to approve that you are approved for an FHA or a VA loan. So having this documentation on hand to get the process started is super helpful. Speaking of which, if you are applying for a VA loan, please have a copy of your DD-214 on hand. Just your say-so isn't enough. Personally, on my driver's license, I do have the veteran sticker. So yeah, that's nice, but they still need a copy of that DD-2. Or if you're in the IRR, bringing some kind of documentation that you're a veteran or that you're currently active or in the reserve component. Bring your documentation when it comes to that. Next is, and this gets a little bit more down the line, but I would still bring it with you on that first meeting anyway. Have a nice folder to put all this in so you look organized. Proof of down payment in some capacity. Proof of your down payment amount. This would be a bank statement showing your balance that you have on hand for that relevant down payment. This way, you're showing a bit of sincerity and you're giving more confidence to that loan officer. Like, oh, sweet, thank goodness, he at least has enough to cover closing costs. Or, hey, they're set to go. They have plenty for the down payment amount. We can approve them pretty readily based off of this. Next, and this goes once again into the video that'll be linked at the end here, something I personally did not do when I went to buy my first duplex, but looking back, hindsight is 2020. This would have been a super great thing to have on hand. So this could go one of two ways. Option one, you're getting ready to go out and look at targets to buy, or you may have a few that you already are looking at. So if you're still just looking at the market, you're trying to get a letter of approval before you move forward any further, you wouldn't necessarily have to have this on hand. But what I'm talking about is historical rent documentation or listing info for similar properties, similar units in your area. So with this, going with option two, if you're looking at a asset, a multifamily property to potentially buy, if you've already got one picked out, if you can get a hold of the historical rent documentation, or if you go onto apartment.com and you look in the same township where that's located, so let's say Bumfuck, whatever state, you look that up and you look up two-bedroom apartments, Bumfuck, whatever state. Go ahead and get some results, print that off, print off the information for these different units. So when you do go to meet back up with the loan officer, or even when you go to do underwriting, you can say, hey, here's the historical documentation of what the tenants already living there have been paying for the past 6 months, year, whatever. Or if there are no tenants yet, you can pull it up and say, hey, by the way, just to help things kind of go smoothly, especially when it comes to figuring out my income with the rents that we can expect from this place, I found a few comparables based on the area, a quick search of the area in terms of what people are expecting for rents. On that note, depending on your specific state, they may not just accept that as good enough documentation for prospective rents to be expected, but that's where your real estate agent should come in. If need be, they will find you other comparables, perhaps even of you may be required to have confirmed like this unit was rented at this price within the past 6 months, and it is comparable to the unit that you have. You may have to have a couple of those. So even so, if you still bring documentation of what you believe you can expect for rents in the area and showing that you're doing research and showing that you're being a good buyer and a good investor when it comes to this property, that's going to go a super long way with that loan officer. So I hope this helps. If you have any further questions, please do go ahead and drop those down in the comments below. Additionally, I will likely do more uploads of this same variety when it comes to house hacking, covering maintenance, tax stuff you may want to look at, things where, hey, I personally did stuff this way. Here's where it worked. Here's where it didn't. Here's some implications that I personally ran into. So go ahead, if you haven't already, once again, I would love it if you hit the like button as well as subscribe and ring the bell. So any questions, comments, or concerns, please do drop that down in the comments below.